Hi everyone, welcome to Black Voices, Black Joy, Gail Borden Public Library's celebration of Black History Month. Every Wednesday in February at 6 p.m., special guests from the Black community will be sharing their favorite stories, books, and poems with us. I'm Tish Calamer, Community Engagement Manager, and I'm so happy to welcome you all. For a list of books and other resources, please click on the link in the event description. Let's get started. Our last program in this series, Black Voices, Black Joy, closes out with Black America Triumphs, celebrating those who triumphed brilliantly and unapologetically in the face of extreme injustice. Pastor Andre Allen reads The Undefeated by Newbery Award winner Kwame Alexander and illustrated by the 2020 Coretta Scott King Book Awards illustrator Kadir Nelson. Then Pastor Andre Allen will read a beautiful rendition of Langston Hughes' famous poem, I Too Am America, beautifully illustrated by Bryan Collier, three-time Caldecott Medal Honoree, whose pictures we've enjoyed throughout this series.
Hi, I'm Andre Allen, and I'm going to be doing a reading by Kwame Alexander on his book, The Undefeated, and illustrated by Kadir Nelson. The Undefeated by Kwame Alexander. This is for the unforgettable, the swift and sweet ones who hurdled history and opened a world of possibility. This is for the unforgettable Jesse Owens. James Cleveland Jesse Owens was a four-time Olympic gold medalist in the 1936 Berlin Olympics. He was considered the fastest man alive during his lifetime, and his athletic victories helped shatter the myth of white athletic superiority. This is for the ones who survived America by any means necessary. And the ones who didn't. This is for the undeniable, the ones who scored with chains on one hand and faith in the other. The undeniable, slavery in the United States was the legal institution of human chattel enslavement, mainly of Africans. Although the importance of enslaved Africans was prohibited in 1808, domestic slave trading continued, driven by the labor demands of cotton plantations. Slavery existed from the early 16th century to the end of the 19th century, a span of over 300 years, and was legally ended with the ratification of the 13th Amendment in 1865. This is for the unflappable, the sophisticated ones who box adversity and tackle vision. Jack Johnson, also known as the Galveston Giant. Jack Johnson was the first African-American world heavyweight champion of boxing. Despite facing racist press at the height of the Jim Crow era, he successfully defended the title 17 times. World champion Jack Johnson. This is for the unflappable and also for those who shine their light for the world to see and don't stop till the break of dawn. for those who shine their light, such as Romare Bearden. Romare Bearden, known as America's foremost collagist, was an artist whose work often portrayed African American communities. In 1987, he won the National Medal of Arts. Zora Neale Hurston. Zora Neale Hurston was a writer and anthropologist known for her portrayal of racial struggles in the South. Her most famous work is the novel Their Eyes Were Watching God. Most recently, her nonfiction book written in 1931 about the story of Cujo Lewis, the last known slave ship survivor, who was rediscovered and published as Barracoon. Jacob Lawrence. Jacob Lawrence was a painter best known for his 60-panel Migration series, which depicted the Great Migration. Henry Oswald Tanner. Henry Oswald Tanner was an artist and the first African-American painter who gained international praise for his work. Also for Augusta Savage. Augusta Savage was a sculptor during the Harlem Renaissance, whose art studio, Savage Studio of Arts, fostered a generation of artists, including Jacob Lawrence. Phyllis Wheatley. Phyllis Wheatley was born in West Africa and sold into slavery as a child. Was the first published African-American female poet in America. The first African female poet in America, Phyllis Wheatley. Langston Hughes. Langston Hughes was a poet, novelist, playwright, and a major figure during the Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s. He was best known for his realistic literary portrayals of Black life in America. Along with Zora Neale Hurston and County Cullen, he established the magazine Fire for young Black artists. Langston Hughes. This is for the unafraid, the audacious ones, who carried the red, white, and weary blues on the battlefield to save an imperfect union. The unafraid, the Black soldiers during the Civil War. Though racial discrimination was prevalent in the military, Black soldiers served in the Civil War, providing additional manpower and playing a key role in the defeat of the Confederate Army. This is for the righteous marching ones who sang, "We shall not be moved, we shall not be moved," they sang, because Black lives matter. The righteous ones, marching ones like John Lewis, who was a politician and prominent civil rights leader. He was the representative for Georgia's 5th Congressional District and one of the Big Six leaders, along with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who helped organize the March on Washington, where Dr. King gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. John Lewis. The Civil Rights Movement. The Civil Rights Movement was a struggle for equal rights under the United States for African Americans that took place in the 1950s and the 1960s. A major movement, the Civil Rights Movement, and they marched because Black lives matter. This is for the unspeakable. This is for the unspeakable. The transatlantic slave trade. The transatlantic slave trade was a segment of the global slave trade that transported between 10 to 12 million enslaved Africans across the Atlantic Ocean to the Americas from the 16th century to the 19th century. The Middle Passage, the transport of enslaved Africans to the New World, was known for its brutality and the overcrowded, unsanitary conditions of its ships. Historians have estimated that between 15 and 25% of the Africans died during the journey. The unspeakable. This is for the unspeakable. Addie Mae Collins, Cynthia Wesley, Carol Robertson, and Carol Denise McNair. These 4 young girls were killed in the racially motivated 16th Street Baptist Church bombing in Birmingham that took place on September 15, 1963. The bombing 4 girls, brought further attention to the struggle for civil rights in the 1960s, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke at a funeral for these girls.
Who bombed them?
There were those who were against the civil rights movement who bombed them. This is for the unspeakable. This is for the unspeakable. Sandra Bland was an African-American woman whose death in a jail cell days after her arrest for a traffic stop sparked protests about her cause of death and police brutality. Michael Brown. Michael Brown was an 18-year-old African-American boy who was shot and killed in Ferguson, Missouri by a white police officer. His death sparked protests in Ferguson and throughout the country, creating the expression, hands up, don't shoot. Tamir Rice. Tamir Rice was a 12-year-old African-American boy who was shot and killed by police for playing with a toy gun, and whose death sparked protests and marches due to its proximity to similar incidents. Trayvon Martin. Trayvon Martin was an unarmed 17-year-old African-American boy who was shot and killed by a neighborhood watchman. His death and the acquittal of his killer was found not guilty, sparked national debate and protest worldwide, as well as statements by prominent figures such as Reverend Al Sharpton, Reverend Jesse Jackson, and President Barack Obama. This is for the unlimited, unstoppables, the dreamers and doers who swim across the big sea of our imagination and show us the majestic shores of the promised land. This is for the unlimited. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a Baptist minister and activist, as well as one of the most well-known spokespersons during the civil rights movement. He was best known for his support for nonviolent civil disobedience, as well as for the Montgomery bus boycott and his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. At the 1963 March on Washington in 1964, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Martin Luther King Jr. Day became a federal holiday in the United States in 1986, and his memorial on the National Mall was dedicated in 2011.
Is that 2011?
2011.
Oh,
Yes, I guess. This is for the Wilma Rudolphs, the Muhammad Alis, the Althea Gibsons, the Jesse Owenses, the Jordans and the LeBrons, the Serenas and the Cheryls, the Reese Whitleys and the undiscovered. Wilma Rudolph was a world record-holding Olympic athlete who became the first African-American woman and first African-American woman to win 3 gold medals in a single Olympics, despite childhood illnesses and physical disabilities that kept her in a leg brace until she was 12 years old. Wilma Rudolph was considered the fastest woman runner in the world in 1960. Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan is a retired professional basketball player for the Chicago Bulls and Washington Wizards, who is often known as the greatest player of all time.
He was the greatest player for the Bulls?
Yes, for the Bulls. Fantastic player. And Althea Gibson. Althea Gibson was a professional tennis player and golfer. She was the first person of color to win a Grand Slam title in tennis. Serena Williams has won 23 Grand Slam titles. Overall, she won 11 Grand Slam tournaments and was inducted into the International Tennis Hall of Fame and the International Women's Sports Hall of Fame. Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali, born Cassius Clay, known as the greatest heavyweight champion of all time, was a professional boxer and activist and is one of the most celebrated sports figures of the 20th century. His records remain unbroken for 35 years. Cheryl Swoops, Jesse Owens, Serena Williams, a professional tennis player, won 23 Grand Slam tournaments. LeBron James. LeBron James is a professional basketball player, often named as one of the greatest to ever play the game of basketball. LeBron James. He has won 3 NBA championships and is the greatest, and is the Cleveland Cavaliers all-time scoring leader and the NBA All-Star game. Although since Kwame Alexander wrote his book, I think LeBron James has won another championship. Yes.
He's a famous tennis player?
Yes, Serena Williams.
Oh.
And Althea Gibson. Yes. This is for the unbelievable, the real cool ones. This is for the unbending, the black as the night is beautiful ones.
You got the wrong thing. So that we understand.
This way. Thelonious Monk was a jazz pianist and composer. He is the second most recorded jazz composer and is famed for his unique improvisational style. During performances, he was known to stop playing to dance for a few moments before returning to the piano. He was inducted into the North Carolina Music Hall of Fame in 2009. Louis Armstrong. Louis Armstrong was a trumpeter, composer, singer, and actor, and is considered one of the most influential figures in jazz. He was an active musician from the 1920s to the 1960s, spanning decades and eras of jazz. In 2017, he was inducted into the Rhythm and Blues Hall of Fame. Billie Holiday. Billie Holiday, whose real name was Eleanor Fagan, is one of America's greatest jazz singer-songwriters, known for her raspy voice and her influence on generations of American musicians. She was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame posthumously in 1973. Miles Davis. Miles Davis was a jazz trumpeter, band leader. Duke Ellington. Duke Ellington, one of America's greatest composers, was an accomplished pianist and band leader of the jazz orchestra and an instrumental figure in the history of jazz. Sarah Vaughan. Sarah Vaughan was a jazz singer and 4-time Grammy Award winner. Ella Fitzgerald. Ella Fitzgerald was a jazz singer, sometimes referred to as the First Lady of Song or the Queen of Jazz. These were the unbelievable. This is for the underdogs and the uncertain, the unspoken, and no longer untitled. This is for the undefeated. This is for you. This is for you. And you. And you. This is for us. Thank you. And I want to give thanks to my grandchildren. This is Alana, Ariana, and Gabriel. And thank Ms. Tish.
I'm Kwame Walker. I'm 9 years old. I'm in 4th grade. And today I'll be reading a poem from Langston Hughes. Youth. This early poem of Hughes conveys his optimism with fear not only for himself, but also for America. We have tomorrow bright before us like a flame. Yesterday, a night gone thin, and sundown name. And dawn today, broad arch above the road we came. We march.
Hi, I'm Brittney Walker, and I'll also be reading from Stories for Young Children by Langston Hughes. Mother to Son. Here, a mother tells her son to continue to strive despite life's hardships. The poem contains one of Hughes's most memorable lines, "Life for me ain't been no crystal stair." Well, son, I tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it and splinters and boards turned up and places with no carpet on the floor, bare. But all the time, I's have been a climbing on and reaching landings and turning corners and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you turn back. Don't you sit down on the steps 'cause you find it a kinda hard. Don't you fall now, for I's still going, honey. I's still climbing, and life for me ain't been no crystal stair. Walkers with the dawn. Being walkers with the dawn and morning, walkers with the sun and morning, we are not afraid of night, nor days of gloom, nor darkness, being walkers with the sun and morning.
I Too. Hughes composed this poem in 1924 at the age of 22, when he found himself broke in an Italian city named Genoa. The first line of the poem probably alludes to the poetry of Walt Whitman, an American poet who died 10 years before Hughes was born. One of Whitman's poems is entitled, "I Hear America Sing." I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to the kitchen to eat when company comes, but I laugh. And I eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow I will be at the table when company comes. Nobody will dare say to me, eat in the kitchen. Then, besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening for Black Voices, Black Joy, and celebrating Black History Month with the Gail Borden Public Library.